Okay, so are you ready for this? You brought like a ton of stuff on how to not worry so much. It's like practical tips and stories, and even some like famous people talking about it. Seems like we're doing a deep dive into Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and Start Living.
I mean, that book is popular for a reason,
Sure,
right?
exactly.
Carnegie was really good at explaining complicated ideas and making them easy to understand and actually use.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to do today. Like figure out his strategies and see how people actually use them to like change their lives.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can all feel a little bit better after this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think, like, the first thing we should do is, like, acknowledge the problem.
Yeah.
Carnegie doesn't try to make it sound better than it is. He's, like, straight up about how bad worrying can be for you.
Yeah.
He even compares it to, like, battles and diseases.
Yeah. He's not kidding around.
Right.
It's like he's saying, hey, this isn't just like a small thing. Worrying can really mess you up.
Yeah, and he uses some pretty crazy examples to prove his point. Like, did you know that when there's no war happening, the number of people who die between 50 and 55 is the same as the number of soldiers who died in the Battle of Gettysburg?
Whoa. That's kind of scary when you think about it. I guess it really puts things in perspective, huh?
Yeah.
Like, worrying might not be an actual battlefield, but it can still hurt you.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Carnegie also says that worrying is normal. He even talks about, like, things he worried about as a kid, like he was scared of being buried alive.
Oh, yeah, I get that. Like, when I was a kid, I was terrified of thunderstorms. I was like, sure, lightning was going to hit our house. I know it sounds kind of crazy now, but those fears felt so real back then.
That's exactly what Carnegie's saying. These fears that seem kind of irrational are actually pretty common. We all worry about stuff. It's just part of being human.
So it's not like something to be embarrassed about.
Right.
It's just something we can learn to deal with.
Right, and that's where Carnegie's, like, toolbox of techniques comes in. One of the best ones is this idea of living in day-tight compartments.
Okay.
It's all about, like, focusing on right now and taking things one day at a time.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like instead of freaking out about the past or worrying about the future, you're just focusing on what you can control right now.
Exactly. This idea comes from Sir William Osler, who's a really smart doctor. Carnegie uses this analogy of a ship with, like, separate compartments that are sealed off. So, like, if one part of the ship gets damaged, the whole thing doesn't sink.
I like that. It's like we're building mental walls to protect ourselves from getting overwhelmed with worry.
Exactly. And speaking of being overwhelmed, remember the story of Mrs. E.K. Shields?
Yeah.
After her husband died, she was, like, super depressed and worried about money.
Yeah, she even thought about, it was a really bad time for her.
Right. But then she found this saying that was like, every day is a new life to a wise man. And she really, like, took it to heart. She actually wrote it down and put it on her car's windshield. And by just focusing on each day as it came and starting fresh every morning, she was able to get through it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a really awesome example of how just changing how you think about things can make all the difference.
Yeah.
So if you ever feel like you're stuck and can't do anything because of all the stuff you got to do, just remember, Mrs. Shields. Try focusing on what you can do today.
Yeah. Sometimes breaking things down like that makes them seem a lot easier to handle.
Exactly.
But what about when you're facing those really big, scary worries? The ones that keep you up at night?
Well, for those, Carnegie suggests something that might seem kind of weird at first. Face the worst.
Face the worst.
Yeah.
That sounds a little intense.
I know, right? But it's actually about taking control. Willis H. Carrier, the guy who invented air conditioning, had this really cool 3-step formula for doing this.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the formula? Okay, so step 1 is you got to figure out the absolute worst thing that could happen. Like, what's the worst possible scenario in this situation?
Got it. Then what?
Step 2, you got to mentally accept that worst case scenario. I know that sounds crazy, but the idea is to get rid of the fear of the unknown. Once you accept it, you can move on to step 3.
Which is?
Calmly figure out how to make that worst case scenario better.
So it's like you're taking away the power of that vague, scary fear and replacing it with an actual plan.
Yeah. It's about moving from feeling stuck to actually solving the problem. And Carnegie gives some amazing examples of this working in real life. He talks about this oil dealer in New York who was being blackmailed.
Oh, man, that's serious. I bet he was freaking out.
He was totally terrified that his business would be ruined. But because he faced the worst possible thing that could happen, which was losing everything, he was able to calm down and actually figure out a solution.
So by like confronting that fear head on, he was able to think clearly and take action.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It is. And then there's this story about Earl P. Haney, who was diagnosed with like really bad ulcers.
Oh, wow. I think I read about him. Didn't his doctors tell him he probably wouldn't survive a trip across the ocean?
Yep. They basically begged him not to go. They thought he was crazy for even thinking about it.
But he didn't let that stop him. He bought a casket, packed it up, and went on a trip around the world.
Uh-huh. He literally took his potential death with him on the journey. But here's the crazy part. By accepting that he might die and choosing to live fully in the moment, his health actually started to improve.
No way.
Yeah. He gained weight, his ulcers got better, and he ended up selling that casket back to the funeral home when he got back home. It's like he beat the odds by just embracing them.
That's wild. So what you're saying is sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept that the worst might happen.
It's not about giving up. It's about freeing yourself from fear so you can use your energy to actually live your life.
That's really powerful. Like, think about a worry you have right now. Could you use this formula to change how you see it?
It's something to think about, for sure. Now, another one of Carnegie's big ideas for dealing with worry is super simple. Keep busy.
Keep busy. That sounds almost too easy.
I know, right? But Carnegie calls it occupational therapy. And it's not just about, like, working more. It's about filling your life with stuff that has meaning, stuff that keeps your mind and soul active.
So it's like crowding out the worry with stuff that matters.
Exactly. Carnegie tells this story about Marion J. Douglas, who went through something really awful. 2 of his daughters died.
Oh, man.
That's just heartbreaking. To deal with his grief, he started building a toy boat for his son. And while he was working on that boat, he realized his mind was peaceful.
It was like the focus he needed to build the boat gave him a break from the pain.
It was a big turning point for him. He realized that staying busy with stuff that had meaning could really help him not worry so much. So he started doing all sorts of things around the house, took classes, got involved in his community, anything to keep his mind occupied.
Yeah.
And it worked. He filled his life with things that were important, and the worry just didn't have room to take over.
That's amazing. There's something really wise in that. Like, think about people like Winston Churchill and Charles Kettering.
Yeah.
They were both super busy all the time, handling huge responsibilities. And when people asked them about their worries, they'd basically say, I'm too busy to worry.
Huh. Love that.
That's like a badge of honor, too busy for worry.
Right.
It shows how powerful it is to put our energy into doing stuff that matters instead of getting stuck in that cycle of anxiety.
Totally. Think about the times you felt the most anxious. Were you just sitting around doing nothing, bored, maybe feeling a little lost? Maybe if you filled your time with stuff you actually enjoy, it would make a big difference. It's worth trying, right?
Totally. But hold on, it's not just about keeping busy with anything.
Right, got it.
Carnegie also talks a lot about not sweating the small stuff. He says that even the biggest, strongest things can be brought down by tiny annoyances, just like little beetles can destroy a giant tree.
Right.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in those little things, but they can really drain you and steal your happiness.
So true. And to show what he means, he tells a couple of different stories. One is about this guy named Charles Seifrid, who got stuck in the woods for an hour waiting for his friends.
Oh, that sounds annoying.
It could have been. But instead of letting the mosquitoes and the heat bug him, Seifrid decided to cut a branch off a tree and make a whistle.
I love that.
Right.
He chose to do something fun and creative, even though he was in a not-so-great situation.
It's a great example of not letting the small stuff get to you, finding the good in a bad situation. But then Carnegie compares that story to what happened with Gilbert and Sullivan.
Weren't those the guys who wrote all those famous funny operas?
Yeah, those are the ones. Super talented, but they let a disagreement over something as small as a carpet completely ruin their friendship and their work together.
Oh, man. Talk about letting the small stuff win. They literally refused to talk to each other and only communicated through letters.
Can you imagine? Think of all the amazing art they could have made if they hadn't let that tiny argument blow up. It's like a warning about how bad it is to hold on to stupid grudges.
Makes you think, doesn't it? What little beetles are we letting ruin our own peace? Are they really worth it?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about staying busy and not sweating the small stuff. What other smart advice does Carnegie have for us?
Well, he suggests something that might be good for your logical side. Using the law of averages. It's about like taking a step back and really looking at how likely it is that the things we're scared of will actually happen.
So instead of just freaking out, you're using logic.
Exactly. And a lot of times when we do that, we find out that the things we're afraid of probably won't even happen. Remember how I said I was scared of being buried alive when I was a kid?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure the chances of that actually happening are basically zero.
Exactly, and Carnegie points out that companies like Lloyd's of London have made tons of money by betting on people's tendency to worry about stuff that's unlikely to happen. They'll insure anything. But they know that most of those things probably won't happen. It's a calculated risk.
Makes sense. It's like how some people are terrified of flying, even though it's actually much safer than driving.
Right. Our feelings often mess with how we see risk. Carnegie tells this great story about a guy named Clyde W. Moss who worked on an oil tanker during World War II. He was super scared of being torpedoed.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can imagine that being pretty scary. Submarines, torpedoes, that's nightmare stuff.
It was a real threat for sure. But he felt a lot better when he learned about how many ships actually survived torpedo attacks.
So he basically armed himself with knowledge.
Exactly. The U.S. Navy had released numbers that showed most tankers didn't sink after being hit. And even if they did sink, there was usually time for everyone to get off safely.
So by understanding the real odds, he was able to calm down and feel more in control.
Yep. It's a good reminder that sometimes knowing the facts can help us stop worrying so much.
I like that. So next time we're starting to freak out, maybe we should ask ourselves, what are the chances of this actually happening?
Exactly. It might change how we see things.
Okay, this is good stuff. We've covered facing our fears, staying busy, not sweating the small stuff, and using logic to look at our worries. What else does Carnegie have for us?
Well, he knows that sometimes there are things we just can't change.
Yeah.
Like no matter how much we worry or try to control things, some stuff is just going to happen.
Exactly. And that's where his idea of cooperating with the inevitable comes in. It's about accepting what is in, instead of fighting against it and making ourselves more stressed.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something that happened to me when I was a kid. I was playing with some friends, and I jumped down from a windowsill. My ring got caught on a nail.
Ouch!
Yeah, and it ripped my finger off.
Oh my God.
It was scary, but after my hand healed, I never really worried about it. What was the point? It happened. I adapted and moved on.
That's a great example of acceptance. Carnegie shares this quote he found in the ruins of a cathedral in Amsterdam. "It is so. It cannot be otherwise."
There's something really peaceful about those words.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just got to accept what is.
He also tells this story about Elizabeth Conley, who lost her nephew in World War II. It was really hard for her, but she eventually found peace by focusing on the good times they had together.
She chose to remember the good stuff instead of dwelling on what she couldn't change.
Exactly. It's about accepting the things we can't change and finding ways to keep moving forward.
So the question we can ask ourselves is, what are we fighting against right now? What could we just accept and let go of? Maybe that's how we'll find some real peace.
That's a great question. And speaking of letting go, Carnegie has another idea I think you'll like. Putting a stop-loss order on our worries?
A stop-loss order. Is that like a stock market thing?
Yep. In investing, a stop-loss order is meant to limit how much money you could lose. Like if a stock drops below a certain price, it's automatically sold.
Okay, so how does that apply to worrying?
Well, we can decide how much time and energy we're going to spend on a certain worry. Think of it like a budget for your peace of mind.
I like that. We only have so much energy, and we can choose to use it wisely or waste it on things we can't control.
Carnegie uses the example of Jack Dempsey, the famous boxer, who lost his title in a huge upset. He could have easily felt sorry for himself, but instead, she chose to move on.
He accepted that he lost and focused on creating new opportunities like running restaurants, promoting fights, doing exhibitions. He didn't waste time sawing sawdust, as Carnegie puts it.
Exactly. He didn't let that one loss define him. He focused on what he could do in the future.
So maybe we should ask ourselves, what worry have we been spending way too much energy on? Could we set a stop loss and get some of that energy back?
It's a powerful idea for sure. And at the end of the day, all of these techniques are about having a more positive mindset.
Right. Carnegie quotes Marcus Aurelius, who said, "Our life is what our thoughts make it. Our thoughts shape our reality. It's about realizing we have a choice."
He makes a really important distinction between concern and worry. Concern is about actually doing something to fix a problem, while worry is just going around in circles getting nowhere.
It's the difference between being proactive and being stuck.
He talks about Lowell Thomas, the famous broadcaster and adventurer. He had tons of setbacks in his career, but he always stayed positive.
He knew that how we think about challenges makes all the difference in how we experience them.
And Carnegie even suggests that we can change how we feel by changing what we do. He quotes William James, who said, "The best way to feel cheerful is to act cheerful.
It's like fake it till you make it.
Uh-huh, exactly.
Put on a smile, sit up straight, sing a song. It's hard to stay in a bad mood when you're doing stuff like that.
It's all about tricking your brain into feeling better.
I love it. And Carnegie shares some amazing stories about people who did just that. What were some of your favorites?
Oh, there's the story about Frank J. Whaley. The guy had like a total mental breakdown. He was so sure that everything bad in his life was because of like things outside of his control.
Yep.
But then he realized something. He realized it was his own thoughts that were making him so unhappy.
It's like that saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Mm.
We can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we react.
Exactly. And once Whaley changed his perspective and started focusing on the good things in his life, he got so much better.
It shows you that we have more power than we think.
Mm-hmm.
Our thoughts really do create our reality.
For sure. Another example is this woman in California who was always complaining. She was so focused on the things she didn't have. Even though she actually had a lot to be thankful for, her negativity was like really affecting her relationships with her family and friends.
Sounds like she had a scarcity mindset. Like she was always looking at what was missing instead of appreciating what she already had.
Yeah, exactly. But if she could just try to act cheerful, you know, like choose to be grateful instead of resentful, she could totally change how she experiences life.
It's about realizing that happiness comes from within. It's not about what you have. It's about how you choose to see things.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Which brings us to another powerful technique. Counting your blessings.
Ah, the power of gratitude. I'm all about that. It's so easy to focus on what's wrong, but when you take the time to be thankful for the good stuff, it can really change your whole outlook.
Carnegie tells a great story about John Palmer, this businessman who was so stressed about his company that he turned into like a total grump. He even said so himself.
Uh-huh. Oh, I've been there. Sometimes work stress can really get you down.
Well, luckily, one of Palmer's employees, this disabled veteran, kind of gave him a wake-up call.
Oh, really? What did he say?
The veteran was like, look, even though your business is having a rough time, you still have so much to be thankful for: your health, your family, the chance to start over.
It's a good reminder that our problems often seem smaller when we compare them to what other people are going through. Perspective is everything.
Absolutely. And there's another story about a woman named Lucille Blake who spent a whole year in bed recovering from a heart problem.
Wow, that sounds rough. A whole year is a long time to be stuck in bed.
It was. At first she was super upset about it, but eventually she started to see that time as a gift.
A gift. How so?
Well, she had the chance to rest and think and really start to appreciate the simple things in life. She started each day by thinking about all of the things she was grateful for.
That's really beautiful. She turned that tough experience into a chance to grow.
Exactly. And she came out of that year stronger and happier than ever before.
These stories really show you how powerful gratitude can be. It's not about pretending our problems don't exist. It's about choosing to focus on the good stuff.
So true. It's something we can all do to make our lives better. Take a second right now and think about 3 things you're grateful for. It's amazing how fast that can change your energy, right?
It really is. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Facing the worst, staying busy, not sweating the small stuff, using logic to look at our worries, accepting things we can't change, putting limits on worry, having a positive attitude, and being grateful. Is there anything else Carnegie talks about?
Well, one thing he keeps coming back to is how important it is to learn from other people's experiences. He even has a whole section in the book called How I Conquered Worry that's filled with real stories from regular people.
It's like a gold mine of wisdom straight from people who have been there.
Exactly. And these stories offer so many different viewpoints and practical advice.
Okay, you've got me curious. Tell me about some of the stories that really stuck with you.
All right, well, there's the story of this woman who lost her singing voice because of a problem with her throat. It was really tough for her, but instead of giving up, she decided to become a lecturer. She started sharing her knowledge and experiences with others.
Wow. She turned her setback into something positive. That's amazing.
It is. And Carnegie points out that even if she hadn't become a successful lecturer, the fact that she tried something new and challenged herself would have been a win in itself.
It's about the journey, not just the destination, right?
Exactly. He quotes this guy, William Bolitho, who said, "The most important thing in life is not to capitalize on your gains. The really important thing is to profit from your losses."
Wow, that's powerful. It reminds us that even our failures, especially the painful ones, can help us grow.
Another thing that comes up a lot is the role of faith in overcoming worry. Now, Carnegie is careful about this. He knows it's not for everyone.
Right. Faith is a very personal thing.
He tells the story of Mary Cushman, who went through some really hard times. First, she had money problems, and then her son was falsely accused of stealing. It was a really dark period for her.
Sounds like she was going through a lot.
She was, but she found comfort and strength in her faith. It gave her a sense of peace and helped her see things differently, which helped her get through it.
Faith can be a powerful thing when you're facing tough times.
He also talks about John or Anthony, who was so afraid of everything that he couldn't even keep a job. He was really struggling. But then he turned to prayer, and it changed his whole life. He went on to have a successful career and a really fulfilling life.
It shows that for people who believe, faith can be a source of comfort and resilience.
Now, we've talked a lot about the mental and emotional side of conquering worry, but Carnegie also says that it's important to relax your body if you want to feel better mentally. He even has a whole section about this.
That makes sense. Our minds and bodies are connected, right?
Exactly. He talks about this technique by Dr. David Harold Fink, where you focus on relaxing each muscle in your body one by one. It's almost like you're talking to your body.
Yeah, I've heard of that. It's called progressive muscle relaxation, isn't it?
Right. He also talks about how exercising and getting tired can actually help you calm your mind.
I can definitely see that. Sometimes a good workout can really help you de-stress and clear your head.
And sometimes the easiest solution is the best one. Just go to sleep.
Sleep. The ultimate reset button.
He tells a story about this guy who worked on a ship and was terrified of explosives. He was able to overcome his fear by accepting that the worst could happen, and then finding ways to relax, like making sure he got enough sleep.
So it's about managing anxiety on all levels.
Yeah.
Mental, emotional, and physical.
Exactly. One of my favorite parts of the book is this section called How I Conquered Worry. It's full of personal stories from regular people.
It's amazing how reading about other people's struggles and successes can give you new ideas and inspire you to find your own solutions.
Absolutely. There are so many great stories in there.
Tell me about some of the ones that really resonated with you.
Oh, man, there are so many good ones. Okay. One that I always think about is Ted Erickson's story. This guy worked on a fishing boat in Alaska. And let me tell you, that's a tough job.
Yeah, I bet. Like, what kind of tough stuff did he have to deal with?
I'm talking crazy hours, heavy lifting, like not the best place to live, the whole deal. But that experience totally changed how he thought about worry.
How so?
Whenever he had a problem in his regular life, he'd ask himself, is this even close to as bad as pulling the cork line? Pulling the cork line was like the worst job on the fishing boat.
Gotcha. And I'm guessing the answer was usually no.
Pretty much always. It's all about how you look at things.
Yeah.
He used that experience as like a measuring stick, and suddenly his everyday problems didn't seem so bad anymore.
It's like he reset his worry level or something.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
All right, who else was inspiring?
Okay, there's Percy H. Whiting. This guy would always worry about his health. I think we've all been there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I've definitely gone down that internet rabbit hole of trying to figure out what's wrong with me way too many times.
Yeah. Whiting was sure he had all these different diseases, but he finally realized he was being a hypochondriac.
Oh, man.
He learned to laugh at himself and not take his worries so seriously.
It's so important to be able to laugh at ourselves, right?
Yeah.
It helps us lighten up and not get so bogged down by all the serious stuff.
For sure. And finally, there's the story of Reverend William Wood, who found inspiration in a pretty unexpected place.
Okay, I'm curious now. Where was it?
He was watching his wife wash dishes, and he was struck by how completely focused she was on that simple task.
Oh, wow.
It made him realize that you can find peace in everyday moments if you're really present and appreciate them.
There's something really beautiful about that. It's like finding something special in the ordinary.
Exactly. So we've taken you through Dale Carnegie's book, and we've talked about his ideas and how other people use them to change their lives. What really stuck with you? What are you taking away from all this?
I think the main thing I'm taking away is that conquering worry isn't about never worrying again. It's about changing how we think about it and how we react to it. It's about choosing to do something instead of nothing, about being brave instead of scared, about being grateful instead of resentful. It's about finding the tools and habits that help us handle life's challenges with more grace and resilience.
Said. And the coolest thing about this deep dive is that you've now got a whole bunch of tools to help you do just that. You can try them out, find what works for you, and come up with your own personal plan for a more peaceful life.
Exactly. We talked about living in day-tight compartments, facing the worst, keeping busy, not sweating the small stuff, using the law of averages, accepting what we can't change, putting limits on worry, having a positive attitude, counting our blessings, and remembering that our life is what our thoughts make it. Those are some powerful tools.
They are. And remember, you're not alone in this. Everyone worries. But if we have the right mindset and we're willing to try new things, we can all learn to live with more peace and happiness.
So what's one little thing you can do today to start using what we've talked about? Maybe it's writing down 3 things you're grateful for. Maybe it's trying that 3-step formula for facing your fears, or maybe it's just taking a few minutes to relax and breathe. Whatever you choose, just remember, you have the power to choose peace instead of worry.